With that, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, Andrew Monarch with Flyover Whiskey. I did a little research on Andrew, and we were talking about it before the call started, but he was quite an athlete in his day back in high school in North Bend, so he's a native Nebraskan and is doing great things now in the startup world, and we have anticipated this presentation for a long time, so I'm going to turn it over to Andrew. Andrew, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I'm looking forward to share my experience and hopefully if anyone can help direct my efforts to make Flyover Whiskey more successful, I'm all ears. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. So at the base of what Flyover does is we turn local farmers' corn into custom batch corn whiskey. The main goal there is to give farmers an opportunity to enjoy the fruits of their labor in a more tangible way. Corn farmers are really at a disadvantage in this regard. I think we all know that kind of farm to fork trend has been pretty prevalent in agriculture. It's a lot harder for corn farmers to see that connection between what they raise and feeding the world than, if you're raising beef cattle, you're able to pull a few fat steers and get them processed and you're eating your own steaks. The same thing doesn't really exist for corn farmers. They're not going to the store and seeing a box of cornflakes and saying, hey, that's my corn I raised, or filling up at the pump and saying, hey, that ethanol in there, that's from my field. And so just trying to make that connection and complete that and offer that service for these farmers. And that's why, we are a whiskey company. We do sell whiskey, but I really think that our model is more of a distillery as a service, in the sense that the farmers are doing the hard part. We get to do the fun part. We get to make the whiskey, but just basically helping transform that corn and that hard work into a different product. And in this case, it's whiskey. Really cool opportunity to showcase these producers through our brand and everything that they do for the agricultural industry, and also at the same time connect those that might be a few degrees removed from agriculture back with those producers, whether that's locally, on the other side of the state, wherever it may be. Something I'm really, I think we all know and feel and experience is, even if we're not back on the farm currently, we're not very far removed from people or family that are. And so I think there's a strong drive for people to make that connection and to support those operations and enjoy that in the meantime. I also always tell people that we're not going to be the highest end top shelf whiskey that you can buy. We're the most custom and personal whiskey you can buy. There's always a story attached to each batch, and to some extent, the whiskey and the taste of it is a bonus. A lot of people, I've had farmers say, I'm not planning on drinking this, maybe once every so often. And so it's really kind of the experience and allowing these farmers and their friends to create their own brand of whiskey in a sense. Obviously, legally, it's not their, it's still Flyover Whiskey brand. I'll make that caveat. So no one at the Liquor Commission here in Nebraska gives me a call later, but in essence, that's what it is allowing them to create their own brand, enjoy all the hard work in the crop that they raise. As far as the process goes, I could talk about that a little bit, but feel free to check out our website. That goes through it a little bit, and I think answering questions, we make whiskey pretty much similar to how a lot of people make whiskey. So that's out there. So I think that to avoid being redundant on that, I think the best way to kind of really go through and demonstrate what's special, I think, about Flyover, what really gets me excited about it, is to go through a few of the stories for some of the batches and operations that we've done orders for. As you can see, here's just a map from our 2020 orders that we've done. Hopefully there are a lot more pins in this coming year, but you can see just like the distribution on the state. So here's a fun batch to do. Basically, Mrs. Lostro reached out to me. Basically, 150 years their operation has been in existence, and you see 3 of the generations here. she wanted to surprise them with a gift, basically the corn and the hard work, the family tradition that was Lostrow Farms, turning into whiskey. So those are a few good old boys enjoying some shooting some Flyover whiskey. Here's another similar thing. Morvex wanted to celebrate a 70th birthday, and so all the boys went in on a present for their dad, and turned some of his 2019 crop into some whiskey. I'm sure those bottles were a little bit emptier later on in the night, but just another cool one. There are also some orders that you kind of wish you didn't have to do, but this particular one was one of my favorites. Just the nature of farming and life is, sometimes farms get sold, and we've done some orders for people that, it was the last harvest coming off that field, and they wanted to kind of preserve, some of the memories, some of the traditions from that field. For this particular one, Natalie reached out to me pretty early on. As you can see, she's batch number 12. Their dad passed away in July of 2019. And this was this was the last field that he planted that he wasn't able to harvest. And so they turned the corn from that particular field into a batch of whiskey. You can see, they've got their legal on it. Again, just a really special way to transform the crop in the memory of their father into something that can be on a shelf. Hopefully they can enjoy for family gatherings for a couple of years to come. This last one was done for a gift for actually my cousin. He lives in Omaha, but my grandpa was a farmer. He ran a dairy out by Scribner, Nebraska, and my brother or my cousin, he lives in Omaha, so they're not farmers, but he's got a few sons, and wanted to connect back with where our family came from and our family origins a little bit. So he'll always bring out his sons, and my grandpa is able to recruit some free labor to help around the place and tour the barns, tour the old milking barns. So in this picture, they actually got a picture of his sons helping my grandpa basically tend his garden. And again, just another example of how agriculture runs deep throughout Nebraska. It's the backbone of our state. And even those not directly involved with it care deeply about it and want to be connected and want to make sure that that tradition and the values that you learn growing up in those kind of in that industry teaches you. And I think that's a great way to segue into kind of why Flyover got started and some of our origins. I grew up on a farm in North Bend, Nebraska. Me and Mitch's father owned a well drilling irrigation business, and I worked for a couple farmers growing up. Just basically developed a really strong passion and value for the hard work in the industry. As far as the idea goes, and built up, it was just a slow culmination of a few different things. Taking some science classes in college. I was in an organic chemistry class doing some distillations, and just frustrated that I never felt like I was gonna use any of that. And of course, my college age mind caveated that with, unless it was to make alcohol of some sort. So basically at that point, it was just kind of a fun idea. I thought it would be something fun to give my friends. And, as it was in the back of my mind, keep seeing that trend, that farm to fork trend that was going, is kind of picking up speed in agriculture. Farmers didn't really have the same access. Grain farmers particularly didn't have the same access to enjoy their crop in the same way. And so that just kind of tagged on another, hey, here's a fun idea. It wasn't until I actually went to did a quick stint for an industrial manufacturer in Ohio, and then when I returned, I was just kind of looking for a little bit of a side business, a side hustle, and I kind of overlaid some of the things I picked up on from the industrial manufacturing experience with some trends that I was seeing with the micro distillery industry. So within manufacturing, there's typically two ends of the spectrum that companies fall on. They're either a low mix, high volume, meaning they're making a few different product lines, but they're making them in bulk, they're operating at scale. Or there's a high mix, low volume model, which is highly custom. You're making a few things for a lot of different customers, different specifications, etc. So as I saw that the micro distilleries, especially across the state, were seeing a similar growth trend to a lot of the microbreweries, it's obviously picking up. I uh, I started to notice that a lot of those micro distilleries were operating on the same playing field. Uh, in whiskey in general, the whiskey industry all operates on that low mix, high volume. They're making a few different brands or a few different products. They're going to make a lot of them. Hopefully, they're going to go through traditional retail channels and they're going to compete for shelf space and customer eyeballs and try to build a brand that will gain them market share. And obviously Jack Daniels and those kind of big boys, they do that really well. And so these micro distilleries, I thought that was really cool. There's actually a decent amount of actually farm-based micro distilleries that raise their own grain into whiskey. And I think that that's a really awesome way to do it. The fact of the matter is, I think that there are a lot of farmers who would love to do that, but they don't have the resources, don't have the time, whatever it may be, to do that. And at the same end of the day, you're competing for shelf space and eyeballs against those big boys. And so they're basically where all the whiskey companies are operating on kind of that side of the playing field, the low mix, high volume, and trying to kind of play that game and compete for market share. So when I kind of overlaid that with my experience in manufacturing, I saw that there was really no one operating exclusively and really focusing on that high mix, low volume model, which, as I started to think about it more, aligned perfectly with some of my just assumptions about the ability to give farmers a way to, like I've said before, a more tangible enjoyment of the crops they raise. And then lastly, just the Nebraska actually has really friendly direct-to-consumer laws. Nebraska is one of the, I think, 6 states that allows you to ship hard liquor direct to consumers. And so that was just kind of the final straw that I was like, hey, I think that this could be a viable business model and something I was willing to take a jump at. Really quick on the name, Flyover Whiskey. Again, there's a lot of company that I have a lot of company that uses these kind of names, but Flyover States is obviously kind of, I think, meant to be a derogatory knock. But I think a lot of people here in the Midwest, especially Nebraska, take pride in it. Kind of the it's not for everybody mentality. And it's true. It's you got to roll up your sleeves. It's not always fun. And there's a lot of pride in that. And I think that's really the kind of spirit that Flyover Whiskey wanted to adopt. So I'll just move into just my experience starting the business, and obviously Flyover Whiskey is really new, and we're in the middle of some growing pains, and so you're gonna hear that reflected in a lot of the challenges and kind of wins in my experience so far. One of the biggest challenges for this kind of industry is the red tape. It's a highly regulated industry, pretty strenuous licensing process, compliance and reports. They're the different, you have to get certain labels approved. So that was a pain in my butt. Uncle Sam sure likes to have his hands pretty deep in this industry. So that's always been fun. But as far as actually operational challenges, a lot of it's just basic manufacturing challenges. We manufacture whiskey, and there's a lot of portions that go into that, but that's the way I think of the business, is we're a manufacturer. And being the small custom scale model that I chose to adopt is really tough, especially starting out just with the uncertainty of demand. And that led to my facilities being sized and some of the processes that I put in place just leading to longer lead times than I would like. I didn't really have much growth contingency. I was thinking it would just be a side hustle that I could do here and there when I felt like it. And thankfully, it's a good problem to have that it's been busier than that. But just I failed to probably be, I factored in the worst case scenarios. I probably failed to factor in the best case scenarios and didn't exactly plan for those contingencies. The obviously a lot of processing bottlenecks. As you may, with any manufacturing process, there's going to be bottlenecks that you need to address. And I felt pretty well prepared to address the ones that I could control. I probably didn't focus as well on the things that I can't control. I had some issues with some of my supplier reliability, specifically for the bottling, that I didn't foresee. And as any manufacturer will tell you, your lead times with your suppliers are basically they're really important, and they're not something you can always control. And so just starting to understand what I can't control and being able to quantify that more has been pretty influential. Another thing that was a challenge for me is just and this is related to the supplier, is just the management of inventory and cash flow. Initially, I wanted to do just-in-time manufacturing, which essentially means that as a customer places orders, ideally my lead times, both in my processes and from the other processes outside of Flyover Whiskey, would be low enough that I could have all the upstream processes fulfilled after the customer placed an order, and that's mainly due to uncertain demand. So I wasn't pumping a bunch of cash into inventory that wasn't going to be converted into cash. That said, as my demand became more steady, I started to kind of create a hybrid model with that so that I could bulk up on inventory and realize those cost savings, reduce some of the lead times. And so just that challenge, especially starting up with my manufacturing process, is balancing the need to have consistent processes and cost of goods sold availability matched with the low cash flow that you inherently usually have early on in a business, was something that's always been kind of back and forth and probably will continue to be that way for the time being. And then last main challenge is, there's a reason a lot of these companies that want to do whiskey companies that want to make whiskey in bulk, it's nice. They make one product, they don't do much customization, and they sell to retail shelves. So they don't sell direct to consumer. Because I'm going direct to consumer, highly customizable, communication, organization has been something, again, similar to the facility size being undersized and some of my processes being poorly designed early on. Just my organizational models, thinking I was going to be doing 5 orders a month, I can kind of keep track of that organizationally in my head. As that grows, that was not going to be feasible anymore. So just something that had to be addressed. Then as far as key wins, I think some of the key elements to the success of Flyover Whiskey so far and just kind of our growth has been, we've really enabled farmers to create and showcase their own brand. And you can see this in, you can see this just with our whiskey. The Flyover Whiskey brand is towards the bottom, and it's small, and it's there, but it's only there for legal purposes. The main thing is we want the customer's label to be big, prominent, because it's essentially their brand. And I think that enabling our customers to be co-creators in the product has been really powerful, and it's something that I think I had a hunch about. I probably couldn't really articulate very well, but when I started to see how much ownership and pride everyone takes in their final product, they really are co-creators. And not only does it, facilitate buy-in and support, but a lot of our marketing has been self-promotion. And I think a lot of people will share our social media posts or take pictures of it themselves and show it, word of mouth, that kind of thing. I think at the core of it is, it's not because Flyover Whiskey is on the bottle, it's because, Wilkie Farms or Rickert Farms is on the label. And I think that that's probably one of the number one things that we've been able to capture a little bit, even if I didn't realize it early on. I think we're really leaning into the concept that it's their brand, it's not ours. Next is just we've been close to customers. We've stayed close to customers, and I joke that it's probably the easiest customer discovery to do, because a lot of it has been done over beers and whiskey, picking my friends that farm back in North Bend, back in Kennesaw, wherever it would be, what they think pricing should be, how many bottles in a batch, what are some ideas for labeling. It's been very helpful, but definitely been easier than customer discovery usually is. And then support. Local communities and friends and family have been incredibly supportive of sharing stuff, giving me feedback on things that could be better. Close relationships that don't have any filters and tell you how it is are always valuable. One of the successes too, I think, and this is kind of juxtaposed to problem with creating undersized facilities and not preparing for growth. I have done, I think, a pretty good job of doing incremental building and investing in the company, and all that's customer and process driven. So we've kept really good time studies and unit economics, basically timing out each, breaking it down our manufacturing process into individual steps, timing each step, timing them again, verifying exactly how long every step of the process takes so that we can easily identify bottlenecks, and then we can pump resources towards those bottlenecks. Again, being a cash strap early company, yeah, you don't have the luxury of over investing and making sure every process is perfect and every bottleneck is fixed right away. And so having those numbers and being able to quantify those things so that we can quickly and efficiently address any bottlenecks that spring up has dropped their lead times down significantly. So hopefully we'll be able to fulfill orders, a lot more orders in a lot quicker time frame. Then another thing was just the utilization of a wait list was something that we did early on, and I think has had a twofold impact on Flyover Whiskey. One being it really helped forecast that demand, which helps inventory. When you're placing a big inventory order, it helps you sleep better at night. But a big thing it does too is it gives kind of a sense of scarcity. And so instead of people, thinking about signing up or kicking the can, they want to sign up now because as the spots fill up, they want to make sure that they're waiting 3 months and not 6. And so that's been kind of a really beneficial thing that we implemented early on, and really helped solve some of those problems that I was seeing. I'm very glad that we set it up that way. As far as just some main things that I really felt propel me to like be able to run the business more efficiently, and I hit on some of these on just my key wins. Lean manufacturing and some of those things I picked up in the manufacturing space in my experience there. I would argue that every business, whether you're a software business, consulting business, or actually manufacturing hard goods, it's all manufacturing. You're all taking some sort of raw materials, you're introducing some value-added steps, and you're delivering that finished product to the customer. Now, if you're lucky to be actually manufacturing tangible things, implementing lean manufacturing tools and kind of methodologies is a lot easier. It's a lot easier to quantify. But I think that there's a really big opportunity for those maybe not actually manufacturing those as easily quantifiable products to utilize these kind of tools. And so I've been very thankful that I was well versed in some of those tools that are available. The next thing is, like I said, the customer process driven improvements. These are my bosses, right? So knowing my customer, knowing my business and processing metrics, my unit costs, letting those direct where money, where time, and where focus should go. And that starts with being able to measure them. And then once you can measure, then you can identify what's going right, what's going wrong, and then you can address those and automate where necessary. And so that's especially just kind of bootstrapping a Flyover from the ground up. It's been that's enabled an efficiency and an agility that I've been really thankful for. And lastly is just the concept of the blue ocean strategy. And so this is actually taken from a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. I usually really despise every business book that exists, but this is really good. And the gist of it is, every industry has red waters, which are basically blood infested because there's a lot of competition. You're competing, like I said, for the same customers, their eyeballs, for the market share, shelf space, whatever it may be. And the problem is usually the best capitalized companies have a unique advantage because they can operate at scale. They've got the pockets to compete really well in those red waters. Again, tying that back to the whiskey industry, think of the Jack Daniels and the Woodford Reserves and the Evan Williams. How are you supposed to compete and steal market share from people that have been doing this for way longer, have all the resources necessary to do it, have just a trusted product that people know about and a built up brand? And so the Blue Ocean Strategy, that kind of framework is just say, you can't necessarily always compete with them. How can you find the blue waters, or how can you find ways that essentially makes your competition obsolete or allows you to operate on a different playing field that your competition isn't addressing? And so that's kind of where that had a really big impact on my ideation with Flyover Whiskey, is thinking, how can I create a business that can operate on a different playing field, so that I'm actually not competing with any of these other whiskey companies. We're doing something, I think, that's pretty unique, pretty novel. And so I think that framework just basically was really influential, knowing that I had lack of resources, lack of experience, and lack of brand recognition to build a company that could be successful in a small way. So that's all I have for today. And if anyone has any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them the best of my ability.
Andrew, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Very interesting. I've got a million questions, but I'm going to start with a couple, and then I'm sure other people have questions. First of all, I'm not a whiskey connoisseur, so is your whiskey considered bourbon, or is it different than bourbon? And then can you give us some idea on how many people you have employed in North Bend making your whiskey on a daily basis?
For sure. So it's not bourbon, it's corn whiskey. Bourbon, the main requirement or one of the main requirements for bourbon is at least 51% of the grain mash is corn. For corn whiskey, that's 80%. And so it's a higher percentage of corn, which means less rye, barley, etc. And corn whiskey actually doesn't have a technical aging requirement. We do age it for a short period of time, but it's not the same as those bourbons. So I always say that, I'm not a whiskey connoisseur per se either, and I don't think a lot of our customers are. I joke that if you want to wear a 5-piece suit and sip bourbon with your pinky up, this isn't the whiskey for you. But we've had really good reviews on taste from a lot of our customers, so that's been great to hear. And then as far as people helping out, again, just not planning for the kind of growth we've seen. Just recently hired one person to help out starting basically now. So that's going to be a big help.
So Andrew, what I mean, there's seed corn. I mean, what constitutes good corn for this product, or does it matter?
There are definitely variations. The general equation is we're taking starches and turning them into sugars, and taking those sugars and turning them into ethanol. And so usually I just have, because this is what's available, traditional yellow dent corn, your field corn, it's what I've built my process to be able to do and do consistently. And we have a lot of people that are, wondering about bringing white corn, popcorn, dried sweet corn, all these different things. And my answer is, let's try it and we'll see what happens. But I haven't had the volume on those kind of orders yet to really be able to give a good answer on what we all can do. I know just usually yellow dent corn or food grade corn both work great.
Perfect. Can I run my car off this stuff?
When it's coming out of the still, it lights on fire. You might be able to run a lawnmower or something.
Thank you.
Was it about $100 a gallon?
So Andrew, I really wish I would have known about your business and product. I'm in the process of selling a farm that's been in the family for 80 years here, and corn was on it last summer and fall, so it would have been good to grab a bushel or two to get a memory bottle of whiskey. But how many bushels do you need to create? Does it depend on how many bottles you want to get, or what's kind of your threshold there?
Great question. Yeah, so the minimum batch size we can do, again, we're custom, and so we wanted to get that batch size as small as possible to make it accessible to as many people as possible. That said, if it gets too low, my unit economics just don't work out. So our minimum batch size is 6 bottles, 750 bottles, and or in any increment of those. So you can buy 6, you can buy 12, but 6 of them is the minimum. And for each batch, we need about 20 pounds of corn, or about 1/3 of a bushel of corn.
Just curious how many batches you are running concurrently?
How many that we've completed?
No, how many can you run in parallel?
Yeah, I can only run 2 in parallel right now. But obviously the fermentation can all happen in parallel, but the actual distillation is limited by a function of the amount of stills I have.
So you are Nebraska based. Do you do any other farms like say Iowa, where the processing time, is that too long, or do you go out of state is what I'm asking?
Great question. And it's somewhat nuanced. So the answer is I could, but my model is really based on, at least initially, Nebraska has friendly direct to consumer laws. And so I can ship my whiskey direct to the consumer's door. If I want to go out of state, I have to basically go through the traditional channels, go through a distributor, and have it go through a retail space. I think it's possible, and I've been exploring how I could basically take their corn, go through a distributor, have a retailer that will hold it for customers to come pick up, but it wouldn't be the same direct to consumer model. So right now we're focusing on Nebraska. That said, we do have some Nebraska people who have Iowa, are from Iowa farms. We can use corn from anywhere, but we can only service Nebraska customers currently. Hopefully this summer we will be making a change there, but there's a lot of regulation that I need to continue to research and address.
Sure, thank you.
Hey, Andrew, have you given any thought to maybe just using your own corn and making bigger batches and then selling it through places like Grow Nebraska to people who want to buy a Nebraska whiskey, but they don't have their own corn source? Or selling to Nebraska restaurants who might be able to serve some of your whiskey because it's made in Nebraska?
Yeah. So I actually just had a lady reach out the other day that's having a kind of a whiskey tasting event at her barn. So she wanted to get some of Flyover whiskey. The biggest thing is, to some extent, we want to make sure we do what we focus on really well, and that's turning local Nebraska corn and small batch whiskey, not doing stuff bulk. That said, there are a lot of people that don't necessarily have corn. And so that's also part of the model is if you're not connected close enough to a farm to provide your own corn, contact us and we can pair you with a local producer or a producer of your choice. And we're growing that list of, so people can choose what farm their grain comes from for their whiskey. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes. We got time for one more question. Does anybody else got a question they'd like to ask?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what kind of lead time you need.
Yes, the lead time once we start the order is about six weeks. Unfortunately, because of some of those processing bottlenecks that I mentioned, we're booked about 6 to 7 months out currently with orders. So get on the wait list and we'll get to the order.
Get our Christmas order in. We better get it in. Christmas order better get in quick, huh?
Yep. Like I said, we're going to be making some changes as far as processing goes, and so once we get unbacklog or get out of our backlog we currently have, things will go a lot more quickly, but that's currently what we're at.
Okay, anybody else? That was a quick question, so we have time for one more if somebody's got a quick question for Andrew.
I have a couple. Are you on your family farm doing this, and where do you get your bottles?
Correct. Yeah, it's on one of our family properties. And so we've got farm ground around, but it's not actually on our farm that we grew up on. And then I get my bottling from a supplier called Berlin Packaging. I think it's a Michigan-based distributor.
Okay, well, Andrew, thank you so much. That was a fascinating presentation. I'm telling you, keep your eye on this pair of brothers. They're doing great things right here in the state of Nebraska. So we look forward to hopefully having Mitch speak to our group sometimes. But thank you so much, Andrew. And I do think you're going to see a spike of orders coming out of SEC for your whiskey. So thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you'll join us next week for Shannon Leinen. She's from York, and I believe she's on the faculty of the college out at York. And she'll be talking about her side gig, the Lockbox Escape Room. So please join us next week. Thank you for being here and stay warm out there.
Thank you, Steve.